Hey there, TV lovers! We are back with the season 2 of Breaking Bad. In this season, we will see things go from bad to downright chaotic. This season is all about consequences. Walt and Jessie are trying to level up their meth operation, but their choices start getting out of control. The terrifying drug lords, moral lines being crossed, and even a massive tragedy that ties everything together in a way only this show can pull off. Oh, and let's not forget Saul Goodman enters the picture because every criminal enterprise needs a criminal lawyer. Key characters. This is going to be a heck of a ride. Let's quickly know the key characters of this season, aside from the ones already mentioned in season 1. Jane Margulis, Jessie's neighbor landlord and later girlfriend who is in recovery from drug addiction. Skinny Pete and Badger, Jessie's friends who help sell Walt and Jessie's meth. Ted Beneke, Skyler's boss at Beneke Fabricators and later Love. Saul Goodman, a sleazy criminal lawyer who becomes involved with Walt and Jessie's business. Tuco Salamanca, a wrathful drug kingpin and formerly the distributor of Walt and Jessie's meth. Hector Salamanca, Tuco's uncle and a former drug kingpin. Gus Fringe, the owner of the fictional fast food chain Los Polos Hermanos. He's secretly a drug kingpin associated with the cartel and becomes the new distributor of Walt and Jessie's meth. Episode 1. In the pilot episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled 737, the episode begins with a haunting backyard scene. A floating eyeball is sucked into a pool drain while a burned one-eyed teddy bear drifts underwater. Meanwhile, Walt and Jessie meet Tuco for a meth deal, but things spike up when Tuco violently beats No-Dose for speaking out of turn.
Whoa! Damn, man, look at that, look!
Tuco drives off, leaving Walt and Jessie shaken, but suddenly returns demanding Walt to save No-Dose from dying. When Walt fails, Tuco orders Gonzo to stash the body. Walt returns home quite fearful. Peeking through the curtains, Skyler emerges from the back with an avocado mask on her face. He sobs and starts to force himself on her even after her continuous no to a point where she screams out, "Stop it!"
Stop it!
They later talked and Skyler said, "I understand your situation, but you cannot take it out on me." Later, Jessie buys a gun, convinced Tuco will kill them, but Walt proposes poisoning Tuco with ricin instead. Jessie is skeptical, but agrees. Meanwhile, Marie's shoplifting causes tension between her and Skyler and learns she has already been receiving therapy for kleptomania, though Marie still refuses to acknowledge the tiara theft. Walt's absence and financial stress, the DEA led by Hank investigates the junkyard and finds the bodies of No-Dose and Gonzo. Hank believes it's cartel related but doesn't realize he's closing in on Walt and Jessie. In a shocking twist, Tuco ambushes Jessie and Walt, forcing them into Jessie's car at gunpoint.
Get in.
And they drive away. Episode 2. In the second episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled Grilled. In the desert, Jessie's car is riddled with bullet holes, bouncing wildly on its hydraulic suspension. Glass fragments from the rear windows scatter as spent casings litter the ground. A body lies half hidden behind the car. Hank briefs his DEA team about a raid on Tuco's hideout. He also tells Gomez he's taking personal leave to search for Walt, who's gone missing. Skyler talks to Tim Roberts about Walt's disappearance, mentioning he seemed agitated but didn't explain why. Meanwhile, Tuco, having captured Walt and Jessie, takes them to a remote shack. Inside, Tuco's uncle, Tio, sits in a wheelchair. Walt tries to poison Tuco with ricin in his burrito, but Tio warns Tuco by ringing a bell. This enrages Tuco, who drags Jessie outside. Walt admits to trying to poison him, leading to a struggle. Jessie eventually shoots Tuco and they leave him for dead. Hank, tracking Jessie's car, arrives at the shack. He mistakes Tuco for Jessie, but when Tuco turns, Hank realizes who it is. A shootout follows with Hank killing Tuco. Unknowingly to Hank, Walt and Jessie are watching from a distance before fleeing. Episode 3. In the third episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled Bit by a Dead Bee, Walt and Jessie work on covering up their disappearance. After burying Tuco's gun, Walt hitches a ride back to Albuquerque where he's found naked and confused in a supermarket. At the hospital, he reunites with Skylar and Junior and claiming he can't remember the past few days. Meanwhile, Hank, still dealing with the aftermath of the Tuco shootout, lies about the details of the confrontation to his superiors.
Agent Schrader, what were you doing in a shooting fight on your own with no backup?
Mr. Salamanca's presence was not something I'd anticipated. I was tending to another matter.
What other matter?
Jesse returns to Albuquerque where he and Badger discover the meth setup at Jesse's house. They move everything into the RV, which Badger's cousin Clovis stores away. Hank later interrogates Jesse, but he sticks to his story. Walt in the hospital admits to the doctor that his memory loss is a cover for taking time off from family obligations. Hank tries to use Hector Salamanca to get information about Jesse, but Hector refuses to cooperate.
Yesterday, Tuesday.
Okay, seems like he's all there. Let's go for it.
Senor, was this man at your house yesterday?
The DEA releases Jesse, who calls Walt from a payphone, and Walt suggests they start cooking meth. Meanwhile, Walt sneaks out of the hospital to retrieve his drug money from his house, witnessing a tender moment between Skylar and Junior. Hank, reviewing footage of the methylamine heist, theorizes that the blue meth is tied to the thieves.
Crazy Eight, Tuco. Somehow, someway, it's all connected.
Walt says he feels good enough that he's allowed to return home. In bed that night, he assures Skylar that he won't go missing again. Skylar asks Walt if he has a second cell phone. Walt says he doesn't remember much about the weekend but claims that he doesn't. Walt leans in to kiss Skylar, but she turns away. Episode 4. In the 4th episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled Down, we see the aftermath of Jesse's struggles and Walt's attempts to cover up his lies. The episode opens with a broken Jesse meeting Walt at a convenience store, asking for half of the remaining drug money. Walt reluctantly gives him $600, but it's clear there's tension between them. At home, Skylar starts to grow suspicious of Walt, especially regarding his second cell phone. She walks out on him, leaving her phone behind, signaling a deeper rift. Jesse's situation worsens when his parents give him 72 hours to vacate the house due to the meth lab, but his mother slaps him after he lies about helping the DEA. Later, Jesse's life continues to spiral as a friend kicks him out and he has motorcycles stolen. After a humiliating experience at a repair yard, Jesse ends up in the RV, soaked in waste, where he cries himself to sleep. Meanwhile, Walt's strained relationship with Skylar grows. He tries to reassure her that he's not having an affair. Skylar, who believes that he's not having an affair but is still hiding something from her, then tells him to say something that isn't complete bullshit.
You know what I've done for this family?
When Walt claims not to know what she wants him to tell her, she leaves the house once again, only to see the RV parked outside. Walt confronts Jesse, angrily refusing to give him any more money. Jesse nearly kills Walt but stops. Eventually, Walt splits the money, keeping the last stack for himself. Skylar, meanwhile, smokes a cigarette outside a convenience store, signaling her own inner turmoil. Episode 5. In the 5th episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled Breakage, we see the impact of Walt's cancer diagnosis on his family. After a chemotherapy session, Dr. Del Cavalier advises cautious optimism, but Walt's hope quickly diminishes when he sees the massive bill for the treatment. Skylar confronts Walt about a $13,000 hospital bill, asking if Elliot and Gretchen would pay it, but Walt assures her he'll handle it. That night, he finds a pack of cigarettes in the toilet, suspecting Skylar of smoking. Meanwhile, Hank is offered a promotion but suffers a panic attack on the way down. Jessie, back at the repair yard, buys a used car and rents a new apartment from Jane. Walt and Jessie clash over their meth operation, with Jessie suggesting they handle everything themselves, but Walt insists on keeping things small. Later, Jessie presents a business plan to Skinny Pete, Badger, and Combo, offering them a cut of the profits in exchange for selling his meth. Meanwhile, Skylar confronts Marie about stealing the baby tiara, and Hank's beer-making hobby causes a panic when bottles explode in his garage. Walt then pressurizes Jessie to use a gun to deal with meth thieves, and Hank, after reflecting, tosses Tuco's grill into the Rio Grande. Episode 6. In the 6th episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled Peekaboo, Jessie has a tense and emotional encounter with Spooge and his partner after they rob him. The episode starts with Jessie observing a beetle on the sidewalk, a moment of calm before Skinny Pete steps in and crushes it. Later, Jessie confronts Spooge at his home, but they aren't there, so he breaks in and waits, only to be joined by Spooge's neglected son. As Walt returns to teaching, he deals with issues at school and the aftermath of his missing posters being defaced. Meanwhile, Jessie is trapped in Spooge's chaotic, drug-infested home. He finds the boy hungry and offers him a sandwich, while the drug-addicted couple returns. Jessie violently confronts them, pistol whipping Spooge. He demands his stolen meth and threatens violence if they don't complete, but the couple gives him only the meth, not the cash. Spooge's wife then uses their son as a shield. In a dramatic turn, Spooge accidentally gets killed when his wife, in a fit of rage, pushes the ATM on top of him. Jessie, in shock, grabs the money and wipes away any evidence. He wraps a blanket around him and he assures him someone's coming for him soon.
Go back inside. All right? You stay right here, okay? You have a good rest of your life, kid.
Episode 7. In the 7th episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled Negro Azul, Walt deciding to back off from handling the meth thieves but later visiting Jesse's apartment to check on him. After a tense moment with Jesse's landlord Jane, Walt finally meets Jesse, who's still grappling with the aftermath of a violent incident. Jesse explains how he couldn't stop a junkie's girlfriend from killing him, which leads him to use drugs to cope with the trauma. Meanwhile, Hank in El Paso mocks the idea of drug dealers praying to Jesus Malverde but quickly feels out of place when he can't speak Spanish with his colleagues. Jesse, struggling to leave his apartment, sends Walt in his place to meet Skinny Pete, Combo and Badger, who are paying for meth on time due to the rumor of Jesse's violent past. Walt embraces his Heisenberg persona, enjoying the newfound respect. Skylar, feeling stuck, applies for a data entry job at her old workplace, Beneke Fabricators, and ends up back in her old bookkeeping role. Ted, her former boss, hints at taking her to lunch, and Skylar's past with him resurfaces. Later, Walt convinces Jesse to expand their drug operation, comparing him to a blowfish that scares off predators despite being small. Meanwhile, Hank and his DEA team investigate Tortuga in Mexico, where a deadly surprise awaits them. Episode 8. In the 8th episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled Better Call Saul. The episode kicks off with Badger being arrested at bus stop after a failed drug deal. When the customer pretending to buy meth reveals he's a cop, Badger is taken in by Albuquerque PD. Meanwhile, Jesse and Jane's relationships develops as they bond in Jesse's apartment, though Jane reveals she's been clean from drugs for 18 months. Elsewhere, Walt deals with family stress and Hank's emotional fallout after the incident with Tortuga.
What? Shrink? No. I can't go down that road. Start going on that road, kiss your career goodbye.
When Jesse realizes Badger hasn't paid up, he tracks him down, learning of Badger's arrest. Hank, back in action, uncovers Badger's connection to Blue Meth, prompting an investigation. Saul Goodman, the quirky criminal lawyer, enters the picture, offering a solution to Badger's predicament. Walt and Jesse, desperate, kidnap Saul, who proposes a plan, find a scapegoat to take the fall for Heisenberg's identity. The episode culminates in a DEA stakeout where Walt and Jessie orchestrate a plan to have an innocent man, Jimmy, in and out arrested as Heisenberg. Saul, ever the shimmer, later pitches his services to Walt, urging him to better call Saul if he wants to succeed in the drug trade.
Better call Saul.
Episode 9. In the 9th episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled 4 Days Out, Walt is anxiously awaiting the results of his cancer treatment. Although Dr. Dalcavoli won't reveal the results for another 4 days, Walt notices a large white spot on his scan. Saul teaches Walt about money laundering and Walt is left with $16,000 after all the expenses, which will be reduced to $9,960 after Saul's fees. Walt hints that his time is limited, but he plans to cook more meth. Skylar suggests a weekend getaway, but Walt wants to visit his mom to ensure she leaves money for Skylar if he dies. Jessie plans a trip to the museum with Jane, but Walt insists on non-stop cooking to finish the methylamine. Skylar drops Walt off the airport, but Jessie pulls up in the RV to take Walt on a cook. In the desert, they cook for 2 days, making 42 pounds of meth worth $672,000 each. However, trouble strikes when the generator runs out of gas and the RV battery dies after Jessie leaves the keys in the ignition. Walt tries to fix things, but the generator catches fire. After more struggles and a long day of working under the hot sun, Walt's health deteriorates and Jessie realizes Walt lied about the methylamine spoiling. Eventually, Walt builds a mercury battery, starting the RV and getting back. At the doctor's office, Walt finds out his cancer is in remission and is furious, realizing his health still isn't perfect. He punches a towel dispenser in frustration. Episode 10. In the 10th episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled Over, opens with the familiar pink teddy bear being placed in a container along with other items as men in hazmat suits clean the white residence. The scene is tense with body bags in the driveway and Walt's Aztec park nearby, its windshield shattered. Walt's cancer remission is the big news at home, but Skylar insists he stay home for a celebration she's planning. He reluctantly agrees, but as soon as she leaves, he calls Jessie. They meet at Taco Sal, where Jessie is happy for Walt but wonders about their future in the drug trade. Walt plans to retire after unloading the remaining meth. At Walt's party, Skylar toasts the absence of Gretchen and Elliot, and Walt awkwardly comments about his cancer diagnosis. The guests stand in uncomfortable silence, adding to the tension. Later, Hank tells a disturbing story about the cartel, and Walt, frustrated, drinks heavily while Junior ends up sick from the tequila. Walt's day is filled with small but significant moments, from his attempt to fix the faulty water heat at her home to his uncomfortable interactions with Skylar, who's grappling with her feelings about Walt's remission. Meanwhile, Jesse faces his own troubles with Jane, who brushes him off in front of her father. The episode ends with Walt fixated on fixing the house and getting back to his meth business.
My territory.
Episode 11. In the 11th episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled Mandala, Combo's death sets off a chain of events that shake things up for both Jesse and Walt. Combo, a dealer in the meth operation, is killed in a drive-by shooting by a rival crew after a tense standoff. Jesse learns about Combo's death, but Walt seems indifferent, not even remembering which of the 3 dealers Combo was. This prompts a fallout with Jesse, especially after Skinny Pete quits the business. Meanwhile, Walt is dealing with his own issues. He meets with a thoracic surgeon about his cancer and, despite the risks, agrees to surgery. Skylar is also facing dilemmas of her own, juggling her pregnancy and work, while Walt's growing strain on their relationship becomes more evident. At the same time, Walt and Jesse try to salvage their failing drug business. Saul attempts to help by introducing them to potential buyer, but things don't go smoothly. Walt ends up meeting Gus, a shady businessman who offers $1.2 million for their meth with a very tight deadline. As Walt rushes to deliver the goods, Skylar goes into labor and Walt's world is pulled in 2 directions: his family and his dangerous business. Episode 12. In the 12th episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled Phoenix, Walt's life continues to spiral as he navigates the consequences of his actions. After successfully delivering a large med deal to Gus, he rushes to the hospital where Skylar has just given birth. He's met there by Ted, who drove her to the hospital, and Walt holds his newborn daughter Holly while also managing the stress of his criminal life. The episode shifts to Jessie, who's grappling with a missing meth stash after a break-in at his apartment. This leads to a heated confrontation with Walt, who accuses Jessie of being unreliable. Walt refuses to give Jessie his share of the drug money, instead proposing that Jessie prove he's clean. Meanwhile, Skylar reveals she's returning to work at Beneke Fabricators, adding financial strain to the White household. Walt struggles with the idea of accepting charity through a fundraising website created by Walt Jr. for his cancer treatment. As tensions rise, Jane and Donald, her father, discuss her relationship with Jessie. This culminates in Jane threatening to expose Walt as Heisenberg unless he pays Jessie's share of the money. Having been informed about Walt's identity as Heisenberg and his personal details from Jessie, she calls Walt at home and threatens to expose him publicly. Walt decides to return to Jessie's apartment in the hopes of talking sense to him. After getting no answer at the front door, Walt enters through the back door as he had before. Jessie and Jane are passed out in bed. Walt is saddened about seeing the used syringes on the bedside table. When he attempts to wake up Jessie, Jane inadvertently flops onto her back. Moments later, Jane starts to vomit, and as she's on her back, she begins to choke on it. Walt initially moves to her side to help her, but after some contemplation, he pauses and decides to not save her. He silently cries from his resolution to let her die. Episode 13. In the last episode of Breaking Bad Season 2 titled ABQ. In a tense continuation of previous events, workers in hazmat suits collect items from Walt's pool, including the shard pink teddy bear, and load them into a van. As the van drives off, two towering plumes of black smoke rise in the distance, signaling disaster over Albuquerque. Inside his apartment, Jesse is frantic trying to save Jane, who choked on her own vomit. He calls Walt, who reassures him and promises help. Cuddling Holly in his arms, Walt assures Jesse, "I know who to call." Walt sends Mike Ermintrout to clear the scene, removing evidence and coaching Jesse on how to answer investigators' questions. Meanwhile, Jane's father arrives at her apartment and discovers the truth about her death. At the DEA office, Hank continues investigating Combo's murder and suspects Heisenberg is still active in Albuquerque. Back at the White household, Skylar is distracted by donations from Walt's secret drug money. Walt later visits Jesse, who is in deep despair, believing he caused Jane's death. The weight of guilt hangs over them as Walt struggles with his conscience. In a heartbreaking twist, Jane's father, Donald, while working as an air traffic controller, makes a fatal error that leads to a plane collision. Upon returning home, Skylar tells Walt that she and the kids are going to stay away with Hank and Marie for the weekend, and she wants Walt out of the house by the time she returns. As she packs up her things, Skylar reveals Walt's lie about his second cell phone led her to discover his other lies, learning that Gretchen and Elliot did not pay for his cancer treatment, and that he faked his fugue state after going missing, and that he never visited his mother or told that he had cancer. Walt follows Skylar outside to the driveway, promising to tell her the truth if she agrees to stay. "Whatever it is, I'm afraid to know," she replies before driving away. Walt watches in horror as debris falls from the sky, including the half-burned teddy bear that lands in his pool. This is how we have reached the end of Season 2. Hope you enjoyed the recap. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. We'd also love to hear your favorite moments from Season 2, so drop them in the comments below. Till then, take care.